This is a tripodfish. He is a wonderful deep sea creature with legs, sort of. As soon as I saw tripodfish, I knew that I would need to make him low poly. So today I thought I would share time-lapse footage of the creation of this model and just talk about the process a little bit. I've started with just a cube for this model as usual. I'm scaling in along the x-axis to make the model more narrow and then scaling way out on the y-axis to make him much longer, because as you can see in the reference photos on the top left, this fish is exceptionally long. We don't know why. Science cannot explain how such a whimsical creature can not only have legs but also be so very long, but we're very grateful that he is the way he is. Okay, you can see I'm just extruding out more faces, one more face for the tail there, and I love this earliest stage of the model. It just looks like the most half-second low-effort drawing of a cartoon fish maybe ever, and I think that's really wonderful for a 3D model. I really love that. Of course, the tail doesn't quite have that shape really, as we can see in the references, but it's fine. It's all good. Okay. Scaling in, I should say, some of the vertices along the z-axis to bring the tail up higher above the body and also the lower segment of the tail lower beneath the body. And then using Control R to just add a few loop cuts here and there. I try to be sparing with loop cuts, but I also do know that I want to animate this wonderful creature at some point in the future when I have time, so I do want the mesh to be able to deform when I do rig and animate this little guy. And of course, making the fish even longer, for he is a very long creature. You can see I also did add some UV sphere eyes earlier, going for Beanie Baby vibes, as always. They are actually, I think they're completely sightless. They do have eyes. Oh, they were called, I looked it up, they were called tiny degenerate eyes. What is the reason for saying it that way? But anyway, they have very tiny eyes because there's no natural light at the very bottom of the ocean where these wonderful creatures live. They actually live in abyssal plains, which are it's the very, very bottom of the ocean, areas where it is completely flat, usually next to a continent. So sometimes they're called abyssal spiderfish. I don't know where spider comes from, but it's great. They're wonderful. Okay, so this begins my long battle with the fins on this model. I don't know what it was, but there's at least, I think, 3 or 4 different iterations of the fins that I will make throughout this modeling process. And originally I started by using the knife tool for the dorsal fin and just adding an extra cut to extrude out a face. You can see here for these, I don't know exactly what they're called. They're referred to as antennae-like fins. I'm gonna call them antennae for today. But these little antenna fins, you can see I just grabbed that long rectangular face that they're coming out of, and I pressed I to inset the face, and then I just scaled that selection way down to be much smaller and more narrow in the shape that I want to extrude out, and then I press E to extrude out these fins, and just start adjusting them, scaling them down a little bit. It didn't quite work out. The way I did these fins originally by using the knife tool or insetting faces and extruding out entire faces for these fins, it just made them too thick. It made them look like they were made out of meat. I don't know. The fins are supposed to be very thin and semi-transparent, and extruding out these faces, making the extra cuts with the knife tool, it did not work. But here I am, slowly learning that throughout the modeling process. This is how I would probably extrude out fins for a shark model. When would I have time to model a shark? I don't even... but for a shark model, I would probably extrude the fins exactly like this, because a shark's fins, they do come right out of the body. They're not like a fish, like in this case, where they're so thin and they're a bit transparent and they're membrane? Is that the right word? I don't know. Okay, you can see for the first two quote-unquote tripod legs, I tried again to just inset a face and extrude out that selection for the tripod legs, and it's okay. The little feet pads at the bottom, the little feets, those came out great. I never changed anything about the little feet on this model. I think they were wonderful, and that's really what they look like. They just look like that. They are a naturally low poly IRL kind of animal. They really just look like a low poly creature. But yeah, you can see the legs, they're just a bit too thick. That's just not quite what they look like. They look very, very thin in the reference photos you can see, and in the bottom reference photo, illustration, whatever. The bottom illustration reference, you can see that when the fish is actually swimming, the tripod legs are actually flexible. It's thought that to stand on their tripod legs, basically what happens is the fish sends fluid into those tripod legs, and then they're able to stand on them, and then when they want to swim away, they are more flexible. I don't know how they do it, but it's very cool. I admire it very much. Okay, you can see here I am making a new material. I'm making a semi-transparent material just using a transparent BSDF, an emission shader, and a mix shader. Super simple. This is my go-to anytime I want to make a transparent material for something that's low poly, like these fins, or I'll use the same type of setup for insect wings, like on a bee model, or glass in glasses, things like that. Super simple. Yeah. I made the material and now it's gone. I don't know what happened. That's definitely the material I end up using for the final version of those fins, but it's disappeared for now, but it'll come back later. I spent so much time on the fins on this fish. I don't know what it is, but they really troubled me while I was working on it, either the thickness or the material or the actual shape. Like right now they look very Sharkie in my opinion. The shape will get much more simple as we go, but yeah, I don't know. I got really fixated on the fins. It'll happen several times in this video. Okay, so you can see I did actually select all the vertices at the very end of the tail, delete them, and I just extruded out pretty much the same basic shape there. Had to make the fish walk around for a second. I extruded out basically the exact same shape again because it dawned on me from watching another wonderful low poly artist that I really love, Voxid. I was watching him work, and he was working on a VTuber, and some different objects on the model, like hair, arms, etc., they were separate objects instead of being just one connected model. And I looked at that and I thought, why am I not doing that? Why am I making it way harder for myself for no reason? So I've started using some separate materials, separate meshes for different things. Like you can see I'm doing exactly that for the tail fin here. That was just a plane with my semi-transparent material that I just shaped into the general tail shape that I wanted, and it worked really nicely. We'll see how it translates when I move to the rigging step later on, whenever I have some time for that. But I think it'll work fine because even though, like a fish, they move very fluidly, it's a low poly fish, so it doesn't have to be the most realistic. We don't necessarily want it to be the most realistic movement in the world, if that makes sense. Okay, and now you can see I'm just starting to extrude out the tripod leg that is found at the bottom of the tripod fish's tail. They're actually called rays. They are bony protrusions from the fins and the tail. Very interesting. Yeah, this was a bit of a challenge for this backmost tripod leg because you can kind of see that originally that shape right there was very triangular, so I think I had to add an extra loop cut just to make it a little bit more consistent of a shape. Instead of triangular shape, I want more of a square or rectangular shape when I'm extruding something out like this, just to keep the shape more consistent, if that makes sense. Basically, it would have looked weird the other way. Okay, attempt number a billion on the dorsal fin here. I've added a plane to my scene. I'm going to use that wonderful semi-transparent material that I love. I'm just deleting the extra cuts that I made with a knife tool earlier on and bridging the edge loops with Control-E to close that selection back up. And now I'm just reshaping this little dorsal fin to my liking, adding another plane here for more fins, and all I'm really doing is just adding loop cuts as needed to kind of do like a really, really basic retopology of the original fin that I made, because I liked the shape, but I just needed something more fin-like, something thinner. So here we are with a plane that I am tracing my original shape with. More changes, just duplicating the dorsal fin with Control-D and then flipping it so that it can fit right on the bottom of the belly. And I think I just parented all of these fins to the actual body, just like I'll also do with the eyes, to make sure that even though they're separate meshes, I want all of the separate pieces to still move with the body when the body moves. Okay, so there's some more fins here, just adding planes and rotating to get the right angle to make sure that the plane does appear to be connected to the tripod leg. It looks like this little part, I don't think what I'm adding right now you'd necessarily call it a fin. It just seems like it's kind of like a membrane that sort of attaches this tripod leg to the body of the fish, if that makes sense. I'm not quite sure what to call it, but it's very interesting. I like it. Okay, and then just making, again, more loop cuts, extruding here and there to kind of taper the shape down into the leg, and then going into front view with numpad 1 just to make sure that the shape of this little membrane or fin follows along the shape of the actual tripod leg and that it's not sticking out at the bottom or anything. And using circle select by pressing C, just making this fish a little bit longer even. The head shape of this guy was very perplexing to me for some reason. I'm not totally sure why. One thing that you can see in that reference illustration, sort of in the middle on the left, is they have a very long mouth. It is the longest mouth any fish has ever had. It's adorable. I love it. But that was part of what, I don't know, I guess surprised me about the head shape, was that it had to be dragged out so much farther than I thought. Okay, so I am undoing the original antennae fins from earlier. I was not a fan. They just did not look right, and when you inset a face like that and then extrude it out, you can create a lot of weird topology problems that are especially apparent if you're using outlines on your model like I do. Those outlines, they're just following the topology that's there, so sometimes if you have weird things going on between faces on your model, the outline loves to reveal that to the viewer. So I decided to do away with the original extruded antennae fin and try something that was more like all of the other fins, where I just use a face and add a couple loop cuts here and there to just contour the shape in the way that I want it. And you can see here, I really like how it turned out on the first try, really. I really liked it, but the only problem was that it just looked too thin to me. And for something like this type of fin, this long segment is going to be the same color as the body. It's going to be that kind of white-blue color. And that's because it's another one of those ray-like protrusions, like the tripod legs on the underside of the model. So because it's more connected to the body and made of the same material as the rest of the body, I want to make sure that that also has some dimension to it, because it's going to have an outline. And if I had kept that long segment of the antenna fin as just a plane that only has, you know, one face, I wouldn't have been able to add an outline to it. So I had to just add a cube to my scene, and again, just like when I wanted to make the fins a thinner version using a plane instead of the extruded version, I basically just added the new shape that I wanted and went into X-ray view and traced the original shape that I had. And that works perfect every time. It's never failed me tracing my own art. Okay, for some reason, again, I'm redoing the dorsal fins again. I don't know, y'all. I'm telling you, I was fighting something with these dorsal fins. I had to redo them so many times. And checking just the general dimensions of our wonderful tripod fish against the reference photo there is so helpful. Again, I talk about how long this fish is. He was even longer than I thought. I had to pull the tail out a little bit farther even, and you can see I'm matching up the length of these fins with my actual fins, just using circle to select vertices and drag them out a little bit farther. Same with the eyes, I'm just selecting them, bringing them a little bit closer to the snout. As you see, they're kind of positioned, I think, that way. In that middle reference there, the illustration, I think those are the eyes. It's kind of hard to tell, to be fully honest. Okay, you can see I grabbed the fins that are attached to those antenna fins up top, the transparent membrane kind of section. I selected those, duplicated them, flipped them upside down, and I thought I could just, attach them to the tripod legs just beneath that and it would work the same, but I don't know, it looks like he's wearing fancy pants. It didn't work the way I was envisioning it. It didn't work out. So what actually worked better was just adding a couple extra loop cuts and moving a few vertices forward or backward along Y. You can see I pressed O to turn on proportional editing just then, grabbed a bunch of vertices on that membrane area and just dragged it down a little bit farther along the tripod leg just to get it a little bit longer and a little bit more, I don't know, it just didn't look proportionate when it was shorter. It's hard to say. Okay, adjusting a couple colors here and there. I think when they're out of water, they're actually like really gray. I think they're actually like a really dark gray, but I like how they look in the, not trail cam. What am I talking? I was thinking trail cam photos for the submersible photos. I guess that's what you call it. Okay, you can see I selected all of these vertices around the tail and the backmost tripod leg to bend the tail downwards. That is actually how they stand, rest, whatever you want to call it. That is really how they use that leg. They kind of bend their tail downward. You can sort of see this in that top reference photo there on the left. It just didn't look right. It's accurate, but it looked strange. So I opted out. And I just sort of moved everything back to where it was again. No problem there. Checking one more time with reference photo here, making sure everything's pretty much where it should be. I wanted to move the downward slope of the head just a little bit farther forward. And after that, I was pretty happy with the whole model, and I knew I just needed to add one little UV map so I could texture paint his silly long mouth onto the head of this fish. Again, they have an incredibly long mouth. It is so funny looking. I love it so much. And you can see I'm gonna do it on the first try. I got this on the first try. This was my best drawing skill moment ever. Oh, I said first try and it wasn't. Okay, there we go. See? Basically first try, sort of. And tripod fish! One thing I forgot to tell y'all about the tripod fish is their conservation status. So I think we all know conservation status categories like extinct, endangered, threatened, stuff like that. The tripod fish falls under a category that I've never heard of before. They are what is called a least concern species. Basically, it means they have been evaluated for conservation and they are very plentiful in the wild. We're not worried about them. Incidentally, capybaras are also a least concern species, which is wonderful because, as we all know, capybaras are very important. all the list of names over on the side over there. Those are all the wonderful members of Sneepsnorp Club. I just want to thank y'all for supporting me. It means the world. And this month for Sneepsnorp Club, it was Sea Dragon Month, and I made us some paper craft patterns and lots of sea dragon stickers, all that good stuff. So yeah.